Okay, hello everyone. It looks like the camera is loading. Let me get a drink of water. Okay, it looks like we're live. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. I'm going to give us just a minute for folks to jump in. Um, I'm excited for today. I'm going to frame this up right here. I didn't really do much setup prep before today. Okay. So hopefully this is streaming live in the group and in the separate event. That's what should happen. I see some people jumping in here, so that's good. Today our topic is about bridge building behaviors, and there's one really critically important bridge building behavior, meaning thing that you can do, behavior change that you can do to bridge across the divide, and whether that is in your family, in your office, in your neighborhood, in your church, wherever the case may be. I know the reason that folks have joined this group is to be bridge builders, to be proactive builders of peace during this time. So today I'm sharing about one really critical behavior change, and as I was preparing, I'm just going to move this down a little bit. I don't know why I'm like distracted by the background today. Okay. So as I was preparing content for today, I, what do you want to say, remembered the laws of motion from the Sir Isaac Newton and found really a helpful reference point because, I think that when something is true, when something is really truth, manifestations of its helpfulness pop up everywhere, So even though the laws of motion are primarily used for like building airplanes and things, I think it's really helpful in our context as well if we want to talk about progress, actual progress, on things that matter to us. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Generally speaking, what I want to tell you is that the number one thing that you can stop doing or start doing, depending on how you want to frame this, the behavior change is let's stop using words against humanity when we are talking with each other, when we are talking even on social media. If you know anything about my work, you know that I am a big supporter of face-to-face or FaceTime one-on-one. In a pandemic world, it's not always together. But human to human interaction when we are having delicate conversations, not bickering in the comments section of stuff with people you haven't known since high school or random strangers. You know that I don't support that. But let's say that the vast majority of people will not heed my advice on that and will continue doing that. In those situations as well, it is very important to avoid words against humanity. And I'm going to give you examples of specifically what those are later in this discussion. But essentially, the idea that I want you to have percolating in your brain is any name-calling, mean-spirited word that makes an assumption about somebody's character. So there are all kinds of words that we use that are mean and they're not helpful. But not all name-calling words do this removal of humanity piece, this assumption about what is the deepest truth about who you are. So that's what we're going to be talking. So if you are watching, could you just give me a quick shout out in the comments? I'd love to know if you're in the group or if you're in the event. I want to make sure this is going both places, and I'm not sure if I'll get comments from both places. We'll see how this works, but just let me know if you're watching. I'd love to hear from you. Say hello. Let me know if you understand what I mean by words against humanity. I'll check the comments here in just a minute, but let's get started. Let's get rolling with some laws of motion. I'm going to scooch us over here. I'm excited about this. Oh man, I just realized I'm not wearing my glasses. I don't actually need them for these purposes, but I really thought that since I'm talking about a science thing, it might be helpful if I wore them. Hi, Missy. Thanks so much for joining. I love you. I'm glad you're here. Okay, so the first law of motion is sometimes called the law of inertia. Gosh, I hope I spelled this right. I really should have given myself notes like I did last time. So inertia. So what this means is an object that is at rest will tend to stay at rest, or an object that's moving in a certain direction, it's going to keep moving in that same direction, unless it is acted upon by an external force. So unless there's a compelling influence by an external force, this object at rest is going to stay at rest. This thing moving in this direction is going to keep moving in this direction. So I'm sure that the thousands of you tuning in right now are already making the connection that says, I want to be that external force when I see systems of injustice, when I see loving people, like Martin Luther King talked about. He's not trying to tackle the white supremacists in that particular letter. He's talking about the loving people that are holding still and staying quiet. So I'm sure that there's like so many people that are like, woo, pick me for that external force. I get that. Love that. Right on. But let's talk about the next law of motion, because it is very important. It will influence how you be that compelling external force. Okay. Number 2, velocity. It's not called that, by the way. It's just about that. And that's how I chose to summarize it. So the second law of motion essentially says that the sum of forces, the net force on an object, will cause it to accelerate. That is what it says, generally speaking. If you think that I wasn't like looking up Newton's laws of motions for dummies, like that is what I did. I did read the ones on NASA's website and I was like, okay, this was not for me. I can see that now. So this symbol here, sigma, is used to mean like sum, S-U-M, the sum of the force, the net force, will cause acceleration on the object. So this is what I want to help you understand, why this matters for our purposes. Because you, as an external compelling force, like we talked about in this law up here, you are more than one force. Your exchange, your communication with this person represents more than one force. And there's 2 primary forces that I want to talk about when we get to law of motion number 2 here. The first one is the way that your exchange causes impact because of information. So the information that you're giving, maybe it's correct, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not something that was known before. I see lots more joining in. Hi, guys. Thanks so much for being here. If you missed the first law of motion, you can catch it in the replay later. So this is one of your forces. We'll call this F1. I am only calling it F1 because I watched a Khan Academy video about this, and that's what the scientist did. He made a little F1 right there at the bottom, so pretend like I'm a scientist. The other force that you're having on this person is presentation. So what I want you to understand is that the acceleration, the accelerating factor that this exchange has on this person and has on you, it's not about like, were you correct? It's about the sum of these forces, right? The net force. And so if the presentation is mean, condescending, belittling, reducing somebody's life experience and perspective, then you are causing an acceleration. You are causing an acceleration, but it might be in the direction that you did not intend. Do you understand what I'm saying so far? We have got to understand this concept. Net forces. And so often people justify the presentation because the information is correct or something. And it's like, okay, but understand that this law of motion says the sum of the forces, the net forces here. So we have to look at them together. And so if your presentation is sending someone flying in the other direction, well, that's not productive, is it? Okay, law of motion number 3 is reaction. And if you are anything like me, you're probably most familiar with that law of motion that says that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And this truth of the universe is kind of what got me started on this, because what I see so much, and I'm sure you guys see it too, on social media and just in general family bickering, is one person has another point, equal and opposite reaction, equal and opposite reaction, equal and opposite reaction, bah! Right? That's what it feels like most of the time. And it feels hopeless. So the fact that we do have these laws governing, just all of how things work, like I said, when something is true, we find manifestations of that truth everywhere. So this is true. It might feel hopeless. It might be like, okay, well, then I guess what's the point? Because I'm passionate and I'm going to come in and I'm going to speak the truth and I'm going to call a spade a spade. That's the language that a lot of people are using, and we're armoring up. We're getting ready for battle and we're coming in, speaking truth, dropping truth bombs, we like to say, and then there's this equal and opposite reaction, and we are getting nowhere, right? We're all in agreement. That's why we're in this group. I don't need to belabor the point. So it might feel hopeless, but it's not. And this is the thing that I think is extremely dope about all of this, is that these same laws of motion that might make us feel like we're in gridlock also explain flight, why flight is possible. Like, arguably the most efficient way to get from point A to point B. Efficient is maybe the wrong word because I understand environmental consequences, but for our purposes of thinking, how do we make progress? How do we move forward as a country? Flight. We can do it. So let's talk about the forces involved with flight, okay? So first of all, I'm going to save this one for last. Oh boy, can you see down here? Yeah, okay. So we have weight. I did not give myself enough room. We have thrust, we have drag, and up here we have lift. These are opposites from each other, right? These things are like working actively against one another. These are the things that made it super hard to get an airplane off the ground, right? But in time, people learned a very important thing, which is airfoil construction. I also learned about this in preparation for this training. Essentially what this means is that we can find a way to allow these truths that aren't going anywhere. Equal and opposite reaction isn't going anywhere. Some of the forces isn't going anywhere. These opposites from each other, they're not going anywhere, right? But the way that you construct the wing allows for the air to split. I'm not going to get all the way into this. You can Google it. I'm not an expert on this. But it splits the air in a way that essentially allows us to work with these forces in order to create momentum. It is possible. It is possible. We just have to be strategic in the way we craft the mechanism that we are using. Can I get an amen right now? Are you guys understanding how powerful this is? Because what this is saying is that the way we conduct ourselves in confrontation, it doesn't mean that we have to be less of who we are. That's not what it means. It means we need to be strategic in how we craft that mechanism, that confrontation mechanism. Depolarization is not about asking people not to hold their opinions or their beliefs anymore. It is not asking people to say, just be less passionate. That's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is think strategically about the mechanism that you're using. How do we do that, Andrea? We're on board. How? So if you missed last week's session, I'm not going to recap all of that information right now, but we talked very specifically about improv skills for baking them in at really key moments in confrontation in order to do this, in order to construct an airfoil that will help you get liftoff, that will help you get that forward momentum, right? But so we are going to talk about this. This is what brings us back to Words Against Humanity. And oh, look at this. Let me recap the 3 lessons here. So the first is be the compelling force, right? The first law of motion. Reminds us that what we need to do is be the compelling force, okay? It's not enough to say, I don't want to make the division worse, so I'll just clam it up. I'll stay back on the sidelines. I won't say what I really think to my family or friends. I'll just keep it inside because I don't want to make the division worse. I see the way people in my camp are contributing to the division and the hate and the resentment. I don't want to be that. Honey, you won't. You won't, because you're going to remember the next 2 things. The first thing we need to give ourselves permission to do is be the compelling force, okay? Number 2 is ask ourselves, what is my net force? So of all the things I'm bringing to the table, my passion, my information, my knowledge, my experiences, all these things, these are all different forces. Am I presenting them in a way that will allow the acceleration that will be a result of this conversation? It has to, it's a law. Will it provide acceleration in the direction towards growth, or in the direction towards resistance, in the direction towards fear, in the direction towards hate of each other, suspicion, resentment, etc.? Where am I accelerating us? And keep in mind, you're not the only object. That person is not the only object. You are too, right? You are being accelerated because they are impacting you. They're colliding with you too. Is this making sense? So we are accelerating each other. And so let's just keep that in mind. What is your net force? How are you presenting your information? And then third of all is this: be strategic. You are an airfoil. You are an airfoil. It's a new mantra. Or this exchange is an airfoil. So those are the 3 lessons. I wanted to recap those. The next point here is words against humanity. So what I would like to do is, if people are willing to just say in the comments some things that either you, if you're willing to fess up, words that you know you use when you are in your echo chamber, or you believe that you are, or perhaps more helpful would be if you're willing to say something that you have been called that caused you to have this feeling. And so I will say, for me, the word fake has been that for me. I have always been an optimistic person, and I have been called that word frequently in my journey. And it is such a deeply painful word to me, partly because it's intended to be hurtful, and also because it assumes that, we'll get into why these words are hurtful in a minute. That's an example for me. So if you're willing to, I'll check the comments later. If you're willing to share something that has been hurtful to you, and the reason I'm asking is that on my personal Facebook page after the debate, I posted something sharing pretty directly about my thoughts on this. And it was a powerful exchange. I did my best to stick within my flow chart that I taught you guys last week, that yes and confrontation flow chart. Check out that video if you missed it. But what it enabled me to do was have really powerful conversations with people that are going to vote for Trump. That is not who I'm going to vote for. And that has been obviously a contentious issue. I think it goes without saying. But what it helped me do is hear, because they were willing to share with me, because I had really stuck with this flow chart. And in our private dialogue, they were willing to share some of these words that make it so hard for them to have meaningful dialogue with people that disagree with them. Missy, thank you. Calling someone a monster. Yep, I hear that type of language a lot. Boy, is that easy to do. And I appreciate you being honest about that. It's kind of hard to tell on yourself, I know, but we are all guilty. We do it, and we do it because we know that we'll get applause from our echo chamber. We know where it's safe to do that kind of thing. We know, even if it's not like applause of people being like, yes, that's the right way to handle the situation. Missy, I don't know if you're familiar with the term clapter. Seth Meyers uses that term. I think when he wrote a chapter of Amy Poehler's book is where I heard him say that. But this idea of knowing that even if people don't officially think it's funny, they'll just be like, I support this or whatever. So sometimes we want that applause, we want that like validation, and other times it's because it's like, wanting to assert dominance over someone else. And really that comes from fear. That comes from like, I'm so scared about what it means that you just said what you said, or that you're holding this belief. I'm scared, and I don't want to be scared. I don't like being scared. It feels way more powerful for me to be mean. Mean feels more powerful. So I'm going to step into that. I understand why we do it. I'm saying it's not helpful. So let's talk about this. We're going to get into a very specific word against humanity in a minute. But right now, I'd like to ask the class what you see here. Anyone willing to comment what you see here? I'll wait. I'm not afraid of silence. Oh, I see some of these comments. Yes, mean feels more powerful. Yep, it does. That's why we do it. I think there's a lag time on these comments, so I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, Missy. Now I see circle. Yes, that's what we see. A circle. So the reason why we are able to define that this is a circle, Snowman knows, I love you so much. So the reason that we can tell this is a black circle is because there is contrast around it. There is something we can hold up against it that's not that thing. In order for us to be like, oh, great, this is this thing. We need all this over here that's not this thing. That is the only way we can define something. You can tell that this is a Sharpie, this is a pen, because there is stuff around it that is not pen, right? That is distinctly not pen. That is how we can identify that something is a thing, right? So part of the trouble with some of the words that we use is that there's a contrast problem. In order to call someone a monster, in order to call someone fake, in order to call someone a hypocrite, what we are essentially saying in that moment is, like, let's use the word hypocrite, for example. I can define you as hypocrite because I am providing the contrast necessary in order to be not hypocrite. I can be the not you that is providing the contrast in order for us to see that you are this thing that I'm calling you. Do you see? Are you following so far? I got distracted momentarily by the comments. I see empty space, Becca, thank you. Charity, being dismissed because I'm just a girl or emotional. Sure. Yeah, those are definitely mean words. Okay, so the contrast problem is what I want to share with you. So in order for something to be defined as a thing, we need to be holding something that's not that thing against it, right? So automatically we've created a self-righteous dynamic. Automatically we've created a condescending dynamic that says, you are this thing, and I can tell you that you're that thing because I am the shining example of not that thing. And so that creates a contrast problem. We're going to talk more about that in 1 second. The second problem I want to talk about, so that's the contrast problem. The second is the connection problem. So if you're just joining us, at the beginning of this video, I talked about words against humanity. And what that means is that these are words that, aside from like name calling of all sorts, is not helpful. It is not what we need to be about if we want to call ourselves peace builders, if we want to call ourselves people of love that are trying to move our country forward, our churches, our families forward. Name calling is never helpful. Words against humanity are words that make an assumption about character, make an assumption about the fundamental truth of who someone is, that goes against their humanity, that dehumanizes them in the most fundamental sense. And so these are words like hypocrite, like fake, like evil, that say this is who you are. This is the deepest truth of who you are. And so in addition to being mean, what it does is it creates a connection problem. Because if we want to have a meaningful conversation with someone, we have to find that common ground, right? We have to be able to make a basic assumption that we can appeal to humanity, that there is some type of logic, some type of like human decency in there that can connect with what we're saying if we're hoping to turn the growth tap on, right? Instead of the rage tap. Some people seem content to turn on the rage tap. That doesn't move us forward, right? So if we make a baseline assumption that somebody is not human, that they are evil, that they are fake, that they are hypocrite, that they are so like unworthy of our time, our love, our connection, we are not going to be able to establish this thing that we all understand we need in order to have meaningful dialogue, okay? So I am going to venture now into territory that I know is sensitive. And I'm going to ask everyone on the call to remember our improv skills from last time: curiosity over judgment, faith in your scene partner, listening hygiene, okay? So one of the commitments that I have made is to stop using the R word as it pertains to people. So what this means is the word racist. I made a commitment that I will no longer call people racist in several contexts, because most of the time when we're using that word, we're not in the presence of an active hate crime, or we're not in the presence of a self-identifying Klansman or neo-Nazi or white nationalist or some other type of person who self-identifies as, you know, someone who believes that white people are better than others. Most of the time when we use that word, let me not put this on you. Most of the time when I was using that word, it was because I was presented with someone who was going to vote for the other guy. Let me just be honest and vulnerable. And I know that that is unproductive and unhelpful, but I was easily falling into the trap of lumping everybody into one category and handily calling the president and other people that word, because I knew everyone in my echo chamber is going to be like, get him, you know? And then the thought occurred to me, like, do I want that clapter? Do I want that type of validation, or do I want progress? Do I want to connect with people and actually move the needle forward on human understanding and actually achieve some of the causes of racial justice that I care so deeply about? So what I realized was the opportunity cost of using that word, because every time I used it, even if it was not directly to someone's face, when we put stuff out there on social media, we don't know who is seeing it. We are robbing ourselves of opportunities to have meaningful dialogue with people, right? Let's talk about the contrast problem. One of the major reasons that compelled me to stop using that word against people, a law can be racist, a system can be racist. I'm talking about human people, okay? It was the contrast problem for me, because what I've come to understand is that our deepest truth is that we are all unlearning racism. And so for me to call someone else a racist was me saying, I am providing the contrast necessary in order to define you as this thing. Not so. I know the ugly thoughts that go through my head. I know the ways that I participate in unjust systems. I know the massive learning that I have to do and unlearning that I have to do. And it is so much more helpful to come alongside as someone who says, I understand why you're making whatever point that you're making. Can I share something that I learned? I understand why you might think that, but this thought, come alongside as someone who is also growing, someone who understands, like, we are more alike than we are unalike. Don't come on as this heavy-handed person that's like, I am woker, I am more informed, I am more educated. And certainly don't use that word as a way of hoping that you can arm wrestle someone into submission. You know, I'm going to arm wrestle you onto the right side of history, you know. Most of the time when I see that word being used, and when that word has been used in front of me, most of the time it's been used by people who are in my camp or whatever. Even about my own family members, when I talk about, you know, like, I have a politically diverse family, and, you know, I have someone who I care about a whole lot that was like, oh, so they're racists. And I was like, no, these are people that I love. These are people that, you know, are shining such a beautiful light of love in this world. It is not okay to reduce people. We know this, right? We know this. And so that word in particular, as I have been very proactive and having meaningful conversations with people who are going to vote for many candidates in November, this word in particular is a word that is getting in our way, getting in the way of having the necessary conversations that could promote the causes of racial justice. And so for me, what I have realized is, when I ask myself the question, what do I really want here? What do I really want here? Do I want to prove that I'm right? Do I want to make choices that I will be able to go back to my echo chamber and be able to justify? Or do I want to take advantage of this opportunity to grow with someone, right? I am not here to be someone that everyone who agrees with me can be like, she's so great, she's so great. Like, my deepest heart knows that together we can do something so good in this country. I'm like promising myself I'm not going to cry right now. I just know we can do this. I just know we can. I know that we can achieve lift together. but we have got to understand the airfoil dynamic that is happening here. And this word, when we use it against people, is causing us to create an airfoil that will make us stay grounded. This word makes a wing shape that keeps us on the ground, okay? So that is an example that I know is tender, I know it's sensitive, and by the way, this is a safe place to share dissenting opinions. I would love to hear from you. Your thoughts about everything that I've just shared. So I want to say that as well. Lastly, I wanted to share some options of things that you could say instead of that, because usually when you're tempted to call someone a monster, as Missy said, or evil or fake or racist or whatever, when we want to call someone those things, really what we're saying is this position that you are supporting, or this system or law or whatever entity of some form that you are supporting, is contributing to pain in the world. And that breaks my heart. And I want to be someone that is creating beauty in the world, not pain in the world. And therefore, I am deeply saddened and moved to anger because of this thing. That's what's happening in your head, right? And so when we take this position instead, we are able, and I know it because it happens in my life over and over and over and over and over, literally, it wasn't yesterday, it was the day before. I was private messaging with someone because of a Facebook post who said, the only reason I kept reading your Facebook post and the only reason that I reached out is because you didn't bash me and you didn't bash my candidate. If one more liberal person were to call me a racist because of this one decision in my life, I just felt like I was going to scream. Now, whatever feelings that conjures in your heart to hear, what I want you to please understand is that's not where the conversation ended. That was a starting point. The only way we get to more dialogue, the only way we get to more love is by getting through this first pass of, like, how are we initiating this conversation, right? Like, how can we, here's what it is. How can we create an environment that is safe enough for the vulnerable work of listening and learning? Those things are so vulnerable. You guys, when I went to college, I thought that all alcohol was called beer, like wine, beer made from grapes. I thought that all alcohol was called beer. I had never in my life met a person that was a gay Christian. Never in my life did I know that that existed. Never in my life did I know that so many things. I don't need to get all into it. I perpetuated a myth on my campus that Barack Obama was the Antichrist. I'm just trying to give you a perspective of what we're dealing with here, like what my worldview was at one time in my life. And I didn't grow into a person that, I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. I have done work to be a more loving, open-minded person. And that didn't happen because people got in my face and called me a racist and a bigot and a stupid person or whatever. That happened because people were willing to have real conversations with me. These are some of the ways that others have modeled that for me. In addition to, we talked last week about what did you mean by that and the power of that simple statement. Here we have things like, I thought about that before too, but ... I'm going to give you a really specific example. Once again, I know I'm on thin ice. I know that this is sensitive. I'm going to give you a really specific example though. I was with someone who was very disturbed by my husband's affinity. I'm not using the right word. Allegiance with the Black Lives Matter movement. And they said, well, if Black Lives Matter so much, why are there so many Black people killing each other? And I'm like, ugh! Like my first instinct was like, scream, hide, cry, like, right? It felt like a lot. And those words were said with like passion, and I was shocked. And so what I said was, I've thought about that before too, and then I'm like, we had a very long conversation after that. And it was like, two wrongs don't make a right. Why would we not err on the side of compassion? That fact doesn't negate the very real statistics around police brutality. etc., etc. Many, many, many more things. I know that that's a specific example. I know that there are people who see this differently. So once again, I'm reminding everyone, this is not an echo chamber, and I want to be a good steward of the gift of your presence in this group. And whatever your opinions and stance are, if you offer them with love, if you are willing to be vulnerable and share, we are happy to discuss. I am happy to discuss. But that's just a specific example around this very specific one. Can I share something I learned? I used that example in the first live session. Again, that was another example of racism. Can you help me understand why blank? So once again, what we want to do in the world of social work, that's my background, we talk about developing discrepancy. This is a motivational interviewing skill. If you don't know about motivational interviewing, Google it. I promise you will enjoy that time spent. So it's this idea of saying, I get this thing, this belief, this stance, this position that you have. I also see this of who you are. So I recently asked the question, with full sincerity, I don't understand how the things that you have outlined here about, I know that this candidate is this. I know it. And he goes, believe me, we all know it. But like still intending to vote for this person. And so my question was, with full sincerity, help me understand, because I see you. I see the deeper you. I see who you are as a loving, kind person. And more things. I don't want to get into the specifics because I don't want to out anybody by accident. Because I think they might be in this group. Anyways, so the point is, develop discrepancy between this deep, real big truth and this one thing. Does this make sense? Develop discrepancy between that with sincerity. And we do that by asking questions like, can you help me understand this? Guys, the more questions we can ask instead of assumptions we can make, that is going to get us where we want to be. More questions, more qualifying even. I know that there's this communication tidbit or a piece of advice that's around there about how qualifying is the language of weak communicators, or, women do that more than men, and it doesn't assume an authoritative stance or something like this. I'm going to say that that's probably true sometimes. I'm also going to say that we are in a distanced world right now. Most of our communication is happening on Slack, text, Facebook, email, etc., etc. The more we can start with a greeting, baseline greeting, a hello to someone, a qualification of, I'm asking this with full sincerity. That type of thing disarms. That's how we disarm, right? So these are all things I care about a whole lot, and I could talk about like Facebook debate etiquette for a while, but that's not the point of why we're here today. What I mainly wanted to share with you today is how heavily it's been laid on my heart that there are people of love, myself included, spreading and peddling hate in the name of justice. And we have to stop doing it. We just have to stop doing it. We have to, because that's not the wing shape that will help us get where we want to be. If we want to be able to fly together, if we want to be able to really see progress, really see momentum happen. And I know that that's what we do. Every bit of rage, every bit of anger, every bit of disillusionment that we feel it's the motive inside of us is love. Yes, the motive inside of us is the desire to create something beautiful. And so the more we can commit to these behaviors, I will not use words against humanity. I will not use them. I won't use them in my echo chamber. I will not use them when I'm angry. I will not use them even if I can prove that I'm right, because I will remember to ask myself, do I want to be right or do I want to be effective? Do I want to arm wrestle this person into agreeing with me, or do I want to help them learn to the extent that I'm able, because I am learning too, because I am growing too? That's how we help people grow, not by pointing out their weaknesses, by setting an example, because we've been there too, right? We grow, we help others grow by growing ourselves. When we turn the tap of growth on, that is a tap that flows evenly. Do you see what I'm saying? You can't call forth growth in the world and then see that in a one-directional place towards someone else. That flows into you too. And so when you are growing, 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 and you are just passionately full of love, that is magnetic. That is magnetic. And if that sounds like a whole bunch of fluey, I don't know what, woo woo is the word I'm looking for, then just keep in mind the basic rules of motion, right? Factor in, am I choosing courage to be a compelling force? Am I choosing humility to factor in the sum of my forces, my net force? And am I being strategic and creative in the way that I am moving through this device? Confrontation, conflict engagement, it's a device, it's a useful tool, it's a mechanism by which we bridge the divide, but we have to be strategic in how we do that, yes? So those are the three things, three concrete things that you can be thinking of. And all together, it just comes right back down to those same improv skills we talked about last week, courage and humility. That courage and humility dance is really what improv is. Yes, and adding things, being brave enough to be that compelling force, listening, being humble enough to hear the contributions of others. Yes, and listen, build, courage, humility, courage, humility. That's how we're going to do it. That's how we're going to do it. It's the slow and steady work. So we have some time left. I'm going to go through some of these comments. If you guys have any reactions, any questions, I would love to hear them. I see that we have new people in the group this week, which is awesome. So if you are a new person in the group, go ahead and introduce yourself. Let us know where you are watching from. It's kind of fun to see how at this point we have people all over the country, which is super exciting to me. Okay, Charity, earlier I was in the middle of a thought when you left your comment about being dismissed as being a girl or being emotional. So yeah, like I think that those are actually really powerful gifts, just like everything is in life. There's two sides to every stick, right? The painful side and the helpful side. And the helpful side of that is understanding how deeply painful it is to be reduced, understanding how deeply painful it is and how deeply unproductive it was. Like whatever this person said to you was motivated by the same things that your angry words are ever motivated by, right? Like they deeply believe a thing, they're holding a vision passionately, and you were a contrasting force from that vision. And so they lashed out at you. And their net force sent you accelerating not in the direction that they were hoping for. So you learned about the laws of motion and how that works in confrontation firsthand in those moments. And painful though they were, sometimes those very painful things can be absolutely critical when we realize, ooh, that person isn't alone in being someone who does that. And I might, like those words, dismissing someone because they're a girl or emotional, Charity, in the world that we live in, the people that surround us, you could tell that story and you would have people like, where do they live? You know, like up in arms, ready to come to your aid. And I know that, Charity, I love you. And I know that you don't only have people that are backing you. And I'm sure I do not want to discredit, as I fear that I may just now have, the intense feelings of hurt that would have been present in that moment. But my point is that there are lots of people, Charity, in our echo chamber that that would come ready to fight hearing that someone dismissed you because you are a girl, or calling you emotional is, of course, like a very hurtful thing to say to a woman. And that word carries like historical weight. Sometimes it's true, and it doesn't change that when we hear it, when anyone hears it. It doesn't matter if you, as an individual human person in that moment, are being excessively emotional. It is a word that means something because of history, right? It's a discrediting word that pulls us out of this moment and into a history of being discredited and being hurt. So, but my point, let me land the plane here, is those moments are really, really important because now you know, not now you know, but you can harness that hurt into motivation not to do that to someone else, right? Let's see what else is in here. Okay, when speaking up, I've been called overbearing or brash. I have too. And I don't even know what to make of it because I think passionate people, that is something that can happen. So, Becca, in some of the previous videos we've talked about in improv, there's this balance because sometimes the overbearing and brash people are hilarious, fantastic improvisers who have more learning to do about not bulldozing their scene partners by accident. And so it's this balance, this delicate balance of humility and courage, listening and building. And I know I have had like extra heavy lifting to do because I think sometimes I am overbearing and brash. But you know what? That's okay. And one of my favorite mantras has been, it is safe to be imperfect. I am enough. All right, you guys, I don't see any additional reactions or questions yet, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off, but I will keep checking. I'll keep revisiting this, and I will look for your thoughts and your questions. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. And I am also going to do one quick ask, which is I believe in this group. I believe in this work. I believe in this group. And I would love your help in growing this impact. I know that we can shift the direction of this country. And I am holding a big vision for what we can do together. And so it's not just the more the merrier, it's the more the bigger the impact, right? Actually, that's also validated in the second law of motion, but it's super confusing and I won't get into it right now. But it has to do with mass and yeah, never mind. You can Google it. But please invite your friends, please invite your family members if you think that they would resonate with the spirit of this group. Tag Peace Building Conspirators on your Facebook page. If this content is meaningful and helpful to you, I'd really appreciate it. All right. Love and gratitude to all of you, and I will be checking the comments throughout the day. Bye.